So now in this today's lecture, we are going to see internal audit, how to prepare the checklist for internal audit, risk management and quality indicator. Audit is the critical review of the functioning and evaluation of services. Internal audit is a process of comprehensive review of the functioning and evaluation of the services. Internal audit is basically a systematic and independent and a documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the specific criteria are complied with. So basically audit is a systematic process of evaluating and assessing objectively the processes and the functioning of the services. Internal audit can be effectively carried out by examining the documents, specimens, equipments, procedures, environmental conditions, examination procedures, personal competence, records and reports. Now, what are the different methodologies which are involved, or what are the different components which are involved in internal audit? What are the various processes, or what are the various approaches you should use while performing the internal audit? It should not be based on solely observations. It should not be based on solely on oral communications, and it should also not be based on solely review of documentation. So it should be a combination of your observations. It should be combinations of reviewing the documents. It should be observations of competency and interviewing of the staff as well as the personnel who are working in the laboratory. It should be observations and examinations of the records. It should be examinations of the review of the environmental conditions, equipments, procedures. So all together will comply a internal audit. So you should use various approaches and combination of these approaches to conduct an internal audit. Effective internal audit will identify the problems and weak points in the system and suggest remedial measures. So internal audit is not only finding the problems, finding the faults. You should have that positive approach where you are going to identify gaps in the processes, deviations from the processes, and you should be able to suggest remedial measures. So we have seen many a times when there is an audit or an assessment, many a times we face such assessments and audits where the auditors or assessors may raise certain gaps or may raise certain non-compliances, but you have to see they should be able to suggest you remedial measures also. It is a part of an internal audit that not only finding the gaps or identifying the problems, but they should also suggest remedial measures to rectify those issues or to have appropriate corrective actions with respect to the audit findings. Laboratory shall conduct one complete cycle of internal audit at least once in a 12 month. So you should cover each and every activity of the laboratory, each and every areas, each and every sections, each and every strata of your laboratory at least once in a 12 months. So at least one internal audit you have to conduct in a year. It is a minimal criteria. You can also opt more than one internal audit. So basically when it is required, when you have newly implemented any management system, whenever you have newly implemented any guidelines, whenever you have newly implemented any new areas, certain new tests if you have included in your laboratory work processes, so you may require an additional audit, or we call it as a focused audit. So those audit will be based on particularly on those areas or on those aspects only. So you may have more than one internal audit whenever you want to have assurance about the implementation of all the activities and all the procedures in your laboratory. As far as these guidelines concerned, it mentions that at least one internal audit should be conducted once in a 12 month. Okay. Internal audit should be done by a person who has been trained as an auditor. So those persons who are trained as an auditor. So there are specific guidelines for to become an auditor. So there are guidelines for auditing a management system as per ISO 19011. So your auditors are Auditors who are conducting the internal audit of the laboratories, they should be trained as per those guidelines of, they should be well aware of the auditing techniques, auditing methodologies. They should be well aware about the guidelines, protocols, routine workflow of the laboratory. They should have competence and technical knowledge. Apart from that, they should have access, or they should be authorized to perform the internal audit of the laboratory. So all these aspects must be considered while selecting an internal auditor of a laboratory. It is recommended that all internal auditors undergo 4-day standard and internal audit training program. So there are various training programs. You might be seeing all over going everywhere. So it is recommended that your internal auditors who are performing the audits of your laboratory, they should have undergone a 4 days training program for the standard, whichever standards they want to audit, and the internal auditor program. So a combined 4 days training program must be attended or must be completed successfully by this person whom we are going to choose as an internal auditor. A technical audit checklist needs to be maintained by each laboratory. So there should be predefined criteria. As I have mentioned initially, there should be defined criteria for performing the audit. For that, you should have specific checklist. What you are going to see, what you are going to examine, what you are going to observe, which activities are going to be get audited. So you should have specific technical audit checklist which is to be maintained by each laboratory. So here in Annexure 7, it is given. So I will have a brief discussion on this audit checklist also. A model technical audit checklist is provided in Annexure 7, which needs to be maintained by each laboratory. So it is a model technical audit checklist. So a ideal checklist, how an ideal checklist should be there. It is given in Annexure 7. So these minimum criteria should be available in your auditing checklist. You can have more than this. Apart from this, any other additional criteria which are relevant for the auditing of your laboratory activity. Laboratories may adopt this to make it more comprehensive and relevant. So it is recommended that laboratories can adopt this checklist, which will provide a more comprehensive and relevant checklist with respect to the auditing of the laboratories. So here is a Annexure 7, basically, which is a technical audit checklist. So what are the components of this audit checklist? SOPs should be there. SOPs should be audited. SOPs, as I have mentioned, standard operating procedures, how to prepare the SOPs, how the SOPs should be written in detail. We have already seen in the previous class. Then your IQC data, that is precision statistics. IQCs are used for the purpose of monitoring the precision in your laboratory results. So the statistics related with the IQC data should be audited. LJ charts should be audited or examined. Equa data or proficiency testing should be audited. So Equa data, LJ chart, IQC data, these are all the key components of your technical checklist, which will focus on your reliability of the results generated by the laboratory. Corrective actions which are taken in case of QC or Equa outliers, sample handling, identifications, and storage. These areas also should be audited. Now, sample handling, identification, and storage, this can be audited by observations, by interviewing questions, or making appropriate activities in your laboratory. These areas can be sufficiently audited. Then measurement traceability, you should have traceability, calibration traceabilities of your reagents or other materials which you are using in your laboratory. Those should have appropriate traceabilities. Then equipments also must be audited. Maintenance of the equipment, preventive maintenance of the equipment. Maintenance will be of two types. One is the preventive maintenance and one is the breakdown maintenance. So what was the turnaround time for breakdown maintenance? How much hours or how much time the equipment was down? What are the alternative arrangement the laboratory has performed during those maintenance procedures? That also you have to check. Then you have to also check appropriate calibrations. Now, who is going to calibrate the equipment? So appropriate authorized laboratories should participate in calibrations of the equipment. They must have appropriate accreditations, or they also must be following appropriate standards.
for calibration. So that also you have to include in your internal auditing. And finally, data on uncertainty of measurement. So what are the uncertainties? What are the allowable deviations in your results? Those data also must be examined during your internal audit. So this is a model checklist which is included here in this document. You can have many more additions, many more areas, activities can be included as a part of checklist here, provided it is relevant and it is going to help you in examining the procedures of your laboratories or compliance of your laboratory. So coming to the next part of this session, today's session is the risk management. So again, this is one of the very important and upcoming topics in the laboratories. Now you might have heard this risk management at various places during various trainings. You might have seen various literatures. If you have faced any assessments or audits, there also they might have emphasis on risk management. So how it has come suddenly or how it has come suddenly in our medical laboratories? Is it something like that? Something newly has been added into your laboratory protocols, in your laboratory standard? So basically, risk management in medical laboratories was introduced long back in 2003, and thereafter, continuously it was there in all the activities of the laboratories. The only thing which was not there was we were not aware about the risk management protocols and risk management concept in the laboratory. So now, with more awareness, these risk management strategies are appropriately implemented in most of the laboratories. So, what are these protocols? We are going to see this topic here in a very short. So, basically, risk is a combination of the probability of occurrence of harm and the severity of that harm. So, here you can see this definition has two dimensions. One is the probability of occurrence of the harm, and the second dimension is the severity of those harm. So what can be the probability that a harm can occur? And the second part is how serious or how severe that harm will be. So the combination of these two is called as a risk. So this definition is given in the ISO IC guide 51. So apart from these two, sometimes we add one more dimension to do this risk combinations. So apart from the probability of occurrence and severity of the harm, we also add many times the detectability of those harm. So how frequently or what are the chances that the harm can be detected in advance. So this is a three-dimensional definition of risk in your laboratory. So basically hazards are all the potential sources of harm. Hazards are the potential sources. Here we are talking about the potential sources of the harm. What is a harm? Harm is any physical injury or damage to the health of people. So basically, we are talking about the health of the people. So these peoples are basically your patients. It can be your staff who are working in the laboratories, or maybe any other personnel who are visiting the laboratory in your for your laboratory for any other purpose. So hazard is a potential source of harm. Harm is the physical injury or damage to the health of the people, and severity is measure of the possible consequences of hazard. Possible consequences, severity of those consequences, severity of those harm. It will determine by the severity of those hazards or those harms which are caused due to a inappropriate procedure. So coming to the definition of risk management, the laboratory shall evaluate the impact of work processes and potential failure. Here we are talking about not failures, we are talking about potential failures on examination results as they affect patient safety, and shall modify processes to reduce or eliminate the identified risk and document decisions and action taken. So risk management is basically a complete complex where we have to evaluate the work processes, we have to also evaluate the potential failures in examination results and their effect on patient safety. After evaluating their effect on patient safety, we should be able to modify these processes to reduce or to completely eliminate these harms. And finally, the documentation of whatever actions and decisions we have taken with respect to handling of this risk. So risk management includes right from evaluation of the impact of work processes and potential failures on examination results, their effect on patient safety, and modifications, that is the appropriate risk management or risk elimination of this identified risk, and finally the documentation of the actions and decisions which are taken during this risk management. Risk management process. Next concept here is in the risk management is the risk management process. Laboratory should create a process map that outlines all the test steps of the testing process from physician order to the reporting of the results wherever possible. Now, many a times I get questions how to perform the risk management, how to assess the risk. So to assess the risk in your laboratory, first of all, you should have a detailed knowledge of all the processes in your laboratories and each step, each procedure which is involved in those processes. So you should know components of the processes in your laboratory. You should have a complete map from where the actual process starts. So the laboratory processes basically starts right from the clinician order raising a request, whether the request is raised appropriately, whether the samples are appropriately collected, whether the billing is done appropriately, whether the procedure of sample collection was appropriate, whether there was appropriate patient identification, then sample transportation, what are the factors which will affect the sample transportation, what are the factors which will affect the sample collection, then preparation of the samples, what are the factors which will affect the preparation of the samples. So you should have a complete map of your laboratory processes right from the physician order to the reporting of the result. So once you have map of these all processes, you will be able to identify where can be the potential hazard, where can be the potential risk, where can be there are chances of something going wrong. So you have to point out. So a simple process, take a blank paper, A4 sheet blank paper, and start writing whatever comes in your mind right from the physician order to the reporting of the result. Whatever comes in your mind with respect to process which are carried out in the laboratory. Whatever comes in your mind, write them in a specific order from top to bottom and identify the areas where there are chances of error. So, for example, if I start mapping out everything and I am finding out one place very critical, identification of the patient. If something goes wrong, if the patient is not identified appropriately, then there are chances of mislabeling, chances of misidentification, which is going to affect all the other processes in your laboratories. And finally, a wrong report is going to the patient, which will either deny the treatment or the patient may be wrongly treated. So this is the process of identifying the risk in your laboratory. So here this is a risk management process map is there. You can see this map, and this map is adopted from CLSI EP30A guidelines 2011 volume 13. So this is a very old document, but the basic risk management process map remains the same. So what you have to do? So here you can see there are two major components. This one big rectangle and the aspect or the things which are outside this rectangle. So we start from the risk assessment. Once the risk is assessed, you have to identify the severity. So once the hazard is identified, you have to see the severity of the harm, like how serious it will be, whether it is possible to have any serious complications or serious damages, that you have to see. You have to also see the probability of harm, whether it will occur or not. So when there is a sample collection, patient identification, the severity can be very severe. The patient may even die because of wrong patient identification. But you have to also check what is the probability. How many times you are doing this misidentification of the patient? Daily, one patient, weekly, one patient, monthly, one patient. or yearly one patient. So you have to categorize probability of this harm. And finally, you have to estimate the risk. You have to evaluate the risk, whether this risk is acceptable or it is not acceptable at all. Like now we know the severity of identification of the patient if misidentified is severe or catastrophic. But the probability, you have barcode stickers, you have appropriate patient identification, you have patient tags, all the things are in place, everything is followed appropriately. And in a year, not a single patient have been misidentified. That means the risk which is evaluated is negligible. The risk after evaluation you come to conclusion that because there is no probability of risk misidentification, even though consequences of misidentification will be severe, catastrophic, but due to all the measures or whatever all the protocols available in your laboratory, there is a very remote chance or a negligible chance or no chance at all to happen this process. So finally, the risk evaluation will comes to zero. So if it is within acceptable limit, you may have to plan some additional risk control measures and you have to monitor if there are chances that this risk can cause severe impact and also the probability of harm is also more, then it will be categorized as moderate to severe risk. You have to control the risk, you have to implement certain actions, you have to put certain protocols, double checking of the patient, positive identification of the patient, minimum two identification of the patient. So like that you have to put risk control measures in place. Then you have to monitor those activities, whether after putting all these things in place, whether now there are any chances for patient misidentification. So you have to keep a monitoring. And if there are any new chances or if there are chances of any new hazard or if the severity has changed or if the frequency has changed, you have to investigate it appropriately and again you have to start the complete cycle. So first part is hazard identification, severity of the harm, probability of the harm, risk estimation, valuation of the risk, control measures, monitoring of control measures, continuous monitoring and investigations of new hazards or investigations of process in right from the beginning or as a part of routine monitoring processes. So this is a complete risk management process which can be utilized or can be implemented in your laboratory. Now the last part of today's session is quality indicators. So it is essential for the laboratory to establish quality indicators towards monitoring and evaluating the performance throughout the critical aspects of pre-examination, examination and post-examination. So you should have indicators which will help you to monitor and evaluate the performance of your laboratory. So basically evaluation of the laboratory performance based on two different criteria or two different techniques are available basically for evaluating the performance of the your laboratory. One is the continuous monitoring of performance with the help of quality indicator and one is the periodic monitoring of the performance of the laboratory with the help of internal audit. So internal audit also monitor the performance of your laboratory and quality indicator also monitor the performance of your laboratory. The only difference is quality indicator monitors it continuously in a real time, whereas internal audit monitors the performance of your laboratory on periodic basis. So you should establish appropriate quality indicators in pre-examination and examination and post-examination processes. You should also know the purpose of quality indicator. What is the purpose of quality indicator? Give information about the performance. So when you define an appropriate quality indicator, you must know what are the objectives of monitoring this quality indicator. Now many times I have seen when you go and when you see the quality indicator of some laboratories, for example, number of rejection sample in the laboratory. So the lab is having a beautiful Excel sheet and they will be plotting beautiful graph. Now what are the data they have collected? What are the data they have collected? But when you observe that data, you will see that number of rejected sample on first day 0, second day 0, third day 0, fourth day 0, fifth day it is 0. So likewise throughout the year, throughout all the 365 days, the laboratory has not even rejected a single sample. Then what is the objective of monitoring that indicator in your laboratory? Is it going to give you any feedback regarding the improvement process? You have already achieved all the targets. Your quality indicator is almost 100% perfect. You have set a target of zero rejection samples and you have already achieved it on a continuous basis. 365 days, there was not a single rejection of the sample. So basically, there is no purpose of monitoring such quality indicator because it is not going to give you any feedback regarding the improvement activities. So you have to define appropriate quality indicator where there should be appropriate objective behind that quality indicator. Then you should have specific methodology of capturing the data, how you are going to monitor, or how you are going to capture the data, how you are going to represent the data with the help of graph, with the help of statistics, how you are going to analyze that data, what are your limitations. Limitations means, for example, there is a quality indicator turnaround time. So I am monitoring turnaround time for my glucose results, and I have fixed a turnaround time of 5 hours. So now 5 hours I have achieved 100% of the report I am able to give within 5 hours. Then to going for the next step or to have more improvement to quality, I have reduced it to 3 hours. So okay, after a few months or after a period of 6 months, I have achieved the turnaround time of 3 hours also. I want to go one step ahead. So I have now put my target turnaround time as 1 hour. So after a lot of hard work and lot of trainings and evaluations and monitoring, I was able to achieve that even that 1 hour also. So now my turnaround time, I have achieved that all the results are getting released within 1 hour. Now I have something which is unrealistic. I want to release all the glucose results within half an hour, within 15 minutes. It is not possible. So now you have to set a limit. You cannot go beyond something. This is the limit. So you should set the limits of your quality indicator. You should also have appropriate action plan when you are not able to achieve the targets in your quality indicator. Like in the first, initially I have mentioned that 5 hours for glucose result reporting. If I am not able to release within 5 hours, then what is going wrong? I should have appropriate action plan. So you should have appropriate objective, methodologies for data collection. You should have appropriate representation of the data. You should have appropriate statistical analysis of the data. There should be appropriate limits for your quality indicator, and then you should also have appropriate action plan when you are not able to achieve those quality indicators. It is not only just making some calculations and noting down some data on daily basis. There should be some outcome from those data that will help you for improving the performance of your laboratory. The quality indicators must highlight potential quality concerns. So it should highlight potential quality concerns. What are the quality concerns are there? It should be able to find out those quality concerns in your laboratory processes. Identify the areas that need further study and investigation. So if your all data says you have achieved all the data and all the indicators to the benchmark to the 100%, that means it is your quality indicator plan is not able to identify such gaps. So your quality indicator plans must be able to identify such gaps, which will help you for further study and investigations. You should be able to track changes over a period of time. What is your progress? What are the targets you have achieved? How many targets you have achieved? All those should be included, and your quality indicator should be able to monitor all those data. What are the characteristics of a good quality indicator? It must be measurable. So you should monitor only those things which you will be able to measure. It should be a measurable quantity or it should be a measurable process. It should be achievable. As I have mentioned, turnaround time less than half an hour is not achievable. So you should fix a quality indicator and quality benchmark which are achievable, actionable, where you can take appropriate actions if something goes wrong. It must be balanced. You should not also expect anything which is unrealistic, and timed. Within a stipulated time period, you should complete those quality indicators, you should complete those benchmarks, you should achieve your targets with respect to the quality indicator. It is not like that you have fixed some quality indicator and since last 10 years you are trying to achieve it and you are not still not able to achieve that is so it doesn't carry any useful outcome. So it should be time. Examples of quality indicators. So here we have included some examples of quality indicator from pre-examination stages like specimen containing labeling errors, specimens rejected, specimens without mandatory history, specimens received beyond stability period, specimens quantity inadequate, specimens levels and TRF details not matching. So these are some of the quality indicators in pre-examination area. In examination area, your improvement in percent CV of analysis over 12 months period, improvement in your PC per preventive proficiency testing performance, equipment downtime, kit non-availability, trainings conducted. These are the some of the quality indicators in your examination areas. In post-examination areas, inpatient laboratory results availability, that is percent of the test results available for morning rounds as stipulated in the institutional policies, critical values reporting in defined time, critical values to be reported in a defined time. It is not like that something critical result is there and you are informing it after 2 hours or after 1 hour. As soon as the result is ready, you should be able to inform it within 5 minutes or within maximum 10 minutes so that appropriate actions can be taken and appropriate decisions can be taken. Turnaround time achieved by defined clinicians or customer satisfaction with the laboratory services. So these are certain examples of quality indicator in post-examination areas. Also, complaints, number of complaints, critical complaints, time taken to resolve those complaints, these also can act as a quality indicators with respect to your operational processes. So you have to select quality indicators as per your requirement, which will help you in your improvement activities. Laboratory can define indicators beyond these also. Example, number of skill, cost per reportable test, productivity per technicians. So all these are miscellaneous quality indicators which also help your institute to appropriate manpower planning or appropriate financial planning of your institution. So those also can be included as a part of quality indicators